Hello and welcome to this edition of Understanding Your Health. I'm Todd Scarborough along with Tom Butler. And Tom, good to have you here as always.
Thanks. Appreciate
it. And you know, Tom, in this show we try to bring down, and that's what you and I mainly, I think, bring to the health community, is the ability to listen to these high-minded people who really talk some great science and sometimes fly way over my bald head as far as intelligence and what they're trying to get across. And what you and I do, and we have this in common, we try to deduce things down to very simple analogies, something that people can understand, fit in their life, which there's so many people that do give speeches that are these high-minded people. I don't think that they can deduce it down. They can only think in those high-minded terms, and the average public does not. So therefore, folks, here's our show of Understanding Your Health, trying to bring this down. And when we've talked before about individual products, Tom, as far as the supplement side of things, but today I want to cover, and you and I talked a little bit, and it's going to take probably more than one show here, because it's a subject that most people obviously have a desire to know more about, especially baby boomers these days want to know more about it, and that's longevity. And you know, when you look at the factors involved and all the science involved with the longevity side of things, we see so many factors that play into these people who are centenarians. But the one thing that we know for a fact that plays in, that's a big factor for that matter, is genetics.
Correct.
Talk a little bit about that. I mean, you're seeing people that live into their 90s and the centenarian mark. And why? Because their father did and their mother did. Yeah. A lot to do with that. Environment versus nature versus nurture. Where do you draw the line there? What do you...
Well, you're going to get a big bunch of variables, so go ahead and research. Anyway, they'll coin, nature and nurture, but somewhere between 20 and 50% is related to your genetics. So, and we're going to talk about this later, I'm sure, because the Okinawans and the Iroquoians or whatever, anyway, the islanders, they tend to live longer. Well, once they start living longer, then their offspring will live longer. So if you live in Okinawa, you have a 300% more chance of getting to be 90 years old than you do if you're in the United States. So we'll go into the foods and their habits and all that. But basically, think of what we just said. That's playing into the genetics. So once you achieve it, you're going to increase it, and that's happening in America. We're lasting longer. So you better learn to be healthy, folks, because you're going to be around here a long time.
And which brings up a really good point, Tom. What's the use of living longer when you're, if you're 90 and unhealthy and you're not able to move around, then really the quality of life comes into there as well. But something as well, Tom, that we'll talk about when we talk about genetics. People think, and here's the misconception, people think a genetic hand is dealt to them, and that is their genetic hand, and that's what they live with the rest of their life. True to some degree. However, that genetic profile we know now through this term epigenetics, as we know, is that there are certain factors, certain things, supplements, certain nutrients, stresses, those type of things that alter the DNA profile, that actually changes that DNA. So, yes, we are dealt that DNA, that structure, that genetic hand. However, we have the ability to change our very genetics in our lifetime.
Well, that's your other percentage. So we have 20 to 50 is that. Well, we have all these other things we can do now. And when you add those up, it's going to equal the genetics.
And so, which brings up a very good point. There's always been this thought of whether it is nature or nurture. When it first came onto the scene, that there was part genetics and part environment. Most people, experts back in the 50s and 60s, thought it was almost 90% genetics, that it was genetics, period, and you could be a chain smoker and do everything wrong and live to 90. We know that not to be true now. And in my opinion, Tom, I think it's almost half. I think it's what you're saying as well. Is it right? I mean,
or
probably,
more. Well,
or more.
I'll bet you probably have a 50% or more chance of changing let's say you're predisposed. Your dad and your grandpa both had diabetes, and it was an onset with age, and so you know that may be in your cards. Well, if you withdraw your type of eating behavior, in other words, don't give in to all that.
Yes,
your genes may not demonstrate that propensity. So in other words, it's there.
Yes.
The gun is loaded, the hammer's pulled back, but you never pulled the trigger.
Right.
So that.
And not only didn't pull the trigger, but set the gun down, walked away, and started eating good food, then you've got a far better chance of survival. That's a very
exercise,
all of those
herbs,
things.
All those other things. And that's what the thing we need to talk about a little bit is, what do these people on these islands do that most of us Americans aren't doing? And you already know, most of them don't have a car. So they walk everywhere.
Yes.
So we talked about that.
Yeah.
So they almost all have a garden, so they grow fresh things. Almost both of the islands and some of the other places that are high on that level of longevity, they have wild things growing, and the people use that. And a lot of the wild things have 10 times the antioxidants that, like the things we say here, oh, let's have some red wine or something. Well, Okinawa has 150 wild plants that are 10 times more powerful. So when you lump that in, and we know this, they're going to eat some fish because they're on the island.
Yes.
And they're going to have that olive oil to
and then
cook
lack
with.
Of stress and everything else.
Yes,
and it's not just necessarily what they're doing, but also what they're not doing that we're doing that may factor in there as well. So we're going to take a break, folks, and we'll come back and talk about a very fascinating subject here as well. And all the kids out there, this is the speech that I give them: go look at your parents. If you do what they do, you're going to look like them in 30 years. So congratulations. And hopefully their parents look good. If that's the case, they probably will. So undoubtedly genetics play a role. We'll talk about how food and lifestyle factor in as well when we return. You're watching Understanding Your Health. Tom Butler, Todd Scarborough. Stay tuned.